Hi guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. So in this episode, we are going to be covering season 3 of Nashville. So just to cover some things before we go into what actually happened this season, I do want to go ahead and say right off the bat that Juliet is not likable this season. The way that the character was portrayed this season really made me think of those actors that consistently play bad characters and they do their job so well that you hate them in real life. That was how I felt about Julia and Hayden almost in this season because I just really hated the way that Julia acted. Obviously, we know that she is a big personality, she's a lot, but with her being pregnant and her hormones being all over the place, and then everything that she was going through. As far as postpartum, she was really just not likable at all this season. I also wanted to highlight that there were a lot of flashbacks that we saw in the season that were not done great. I think we did see them in season 1 and season 2, and obviously the flashbacks were supposed to be of when certain characters were younger, and they just had this really awful Facetune thing going on where they tried to make the characters look younger, but their faces just looked really weird and it just wasn't believable. And so it's almost like they should have just had younger people play the younger versions of the characters that they were doing the flashbacks for. But I just wanted to go ahead and call that out. And with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into season 3. So we have season 3 starting with Juliet being pregnant. She's really concerned about whether or not she should have this baby because she did sleep with Jeff. So with Juliet being pregnant, obviously she just slept with Jeff, and so she's really worried about whose baby this is. She thinks that it's Jeff. She's just really in this bad position of being kind of like in the middle of her career and then dealing with the breakup, the loss from her cheating on Avery, and then dealing with the fact that she's pregnant. And so obviously her and Avery are not on good terms, and Avery is just spiraling at this point. He still loves Juliet, but he's very mad at her, and so he is just lashing out and reacting very badly to everyone around him. And at one point, he's drunk and he ends up at the wrong house, and so I think maybe the owners called the cops and stuff like that, and so he ends up having to spend time in jail. He only knows one number by heart, and he ends up calling Juliet to come bail him out, and he just goes off on her, and he says that he wants to feel nothing for her, and it was at that moment that she was wanting to tell him that she was pregnant, but she decided not to, and the reason why she wants to tell him that she is pregnant is because she got a checkup, and it was revealed that the baby was actually 8 weeks old, so it was before she slept with Jeff. So she knows for sure that it's Avery's baby, and she wants to keep the baby, and whether or not Avery will be involved depend on whether or not, from her perspective, depend on whether or not he wants to be in a relationship with her. And Avery, after he has processed the information, he pushes back on that and he says, regardless of whether or not you and I are together, you can't dictate whether I'm going to be a father to my child. And so we have all of that happening. So there is one moment where we have, prior to them having that conversation where Avery kind of comes around and he decides that he wants to be there for her and the baby, we do have Juliet performing on stage, and she actually ends up collapsing, and at this point she has Zoe as one of her backup singers, and so Juliet is in the middle of performing. She runs off stage. Zoe kind of knows what's going on. I think at this point it may not have been revealed that to everyone else that Juliet was pregnant, but Zoe had overheard Juliet talking about this in her dressing room, and so she knows that there's something going on. And so when Juliet runs off the stage, Zoe steps in and kind of takes over the concert. She's singing Juliet's lines, and just before Juliet passes out, she sees Zoe doing this, and the first thing that she does when she gets back is she fires Zoe for having the balls to do that. Then the next thing that we have happening is that we have Juliet and Avery kind of going back and forth, and he agrees to kind of like be more involved in the process. And then they're just deciding on what type of birth to have. Like, are they going to the hospital? Is it a at-home birth? Is there going to be medication involved? And so Avery isn't wanting to do anything too intimate with her as far as the at-home stuff. I'm not sure if I'm gonna pronounce this correctly, but there's something called Lamaze, which is basically like a breathing technique for when you give birth. And so part of this is that the father has to sit behind the mother and wrap his arms around her belly. And Avery doesn't want to do this initially because obviously it's too intimate for where they are in their relationship, and so he's not really willing to explore this. And then this is something that Juliet needs. She does need someone to be her partner for that, and she eventually asks Emily to do this. At some point, Emily comes to Avery privately and she tells him or asks him to be Juliet's partner, and he kind of like agrees at that point when she realizes like where they are in this journey of them having a baby. And then we also see the dynamic really shifting during this point. You know, Juliet's kind of like jealous about Avery hanging out with other people, of him having opportunities and stuff like that. And so she's really having to understand that they are in this friend zone sort of situation. And we have this moment where Avery is buying the crib. He ends up buying the wrong one, and he delivers it to Juliet's house. And this is a really great scene. I actually really loved the song that she was doing or performing at the time that he came in. It's called Disappear, and I've been listening to the song on repeat. It's a really amazing song, so if you don't remember it, definitely go ahead and check it out on iTunes. But anyway, so he is delivering the crate to Juliet's house. We hear her singing this song, and it kind of switches back and forth between her singing it and then Emily and Avery interacting about the crib. And so he kind of has this moment where he's pushing the crib in, and he's hearing Juliet sing, and he just looks up and then he's just like staring at her, and it looks like he's like falling in love with her all over. And so I really love that moment for them because it's Juliet performing the music that she wants to perform. It's her at her best, and you see Avery kind of like falling in love with her all over again, and it's just a beautiful moment. And so I really love that scene. We then later have them getting married, and Avery ends up moving in with all of his stuff, and they kind of just fight over where his stuff should go because obviously with him moving in, he could have just bought like his clothing and stuff like that. He didn't need to bring physical items like his couch, his chair, and all of that stuff. And so obviously Juliet has a certain style, design of interior decorating in her house, and so a lot of his stuff it doesn't really fit. But they have one particular fight over this comfortable chair that he has. At first, I think it's in the living room, and then he puts it in their bedroom, and then they just fight about the fact that there's nowhere for his stuff. And then we see later on that that chair ends up in the baby's nursery, and so it was a beautiful kind of full circle moment for them. Next, we have Luke punishing Deacon on his tour. So we know that in the last season, Luke proposed to Raina, and then Deacon basically went to Raina that same night and proposed to her. We do have Raina telling Luke about this happening. The result of this is that we have a lot of friction between Luke and Deacon over Raina, and both Deacon and Maddie think that Deacon is going to be kicked off of Luke's tour because of everything that happened with Raina. And Luke actually goes the opposite route. He keeps Deacon on as a way of punishing him. He is singing songs about Raina. He's referencing his family, Raina's family, blah blah blah, and he's just making a lot of comments that are digs at Deacon. And so obviously this is not a very good environment for Deacon to be in because he's basically being tortured emotionally, knowing that he's losing Raina to Luke at this point. We do see Luke starting to hang out with a new woman, Pam. She's kind of really rough around the edges. She's a backup singer. They hang out. He kind of talks to her about everything that he's navigating with Raina and Luke, and she's kind of really forcing him to kind of like get over himself, appreciate the opportunity that he has to tour, to be in the limelight, and they end up getting really close. He writes her a song, and he showed up Luke by performing the song at some like after party, and obviously he's a good singer, and so he's singing to Pam, and obviously they're surrounded by a bunch of musicians, and so they're able to pick up on the beat. They jump in to give him supporting instrumentals or whatever, and then you have Pam kind of singing, and so Luke doesn't like this moment because it takes the attention off of him, but this is a beautiful moment between Deacon and Pam. We also have Will as a part of this tour with Luke and Deacon. Will has brought his male trainer on this tour with him, and so this is an outlet for him because he was very frustrated in his relationship with Layla, and so he is seeking out those relationships with men, and so he has his trainer on tour with him, and they're hanging out, they're hooking out, and at one point, him and the trainer, they fall out because Will approaches the trainer about signing a NDA. This comes from Jeff, who wants to protect Will's image because he knows that if it gets out that Will is gay in the country music scene, it's going to be really bad for him. And so he approaches this trainer guy to sign an NDA. He doesn't want to sign it. They kind of break up. And so you have Will trying to find somebody else to hook up with, and he goes walking in the park, and you see this man kind of like off in the distance, and he's like standing by the trees in the shadows, and then Will stops and kind of looks at him, and they get closer, and then they interact, and this scene actually reminded me of something from Riverdale, and it was another scene where one of the gay characters was picking up men and hooking up with men in the park, and so obviously we see this scene playing out in Nashville, and it's actually a trap. There's one man who's kind of like luring in people to hook up with, but another man comes out and they end up jumping that person, and so Will gets jumped in the park. He gets beat up really badly, and he has to take a cab back to the hotel. He looks really banged up, and we have Deacon seeing Will as he's leaving the cab to go into the hotel. And so he ends up going to the cabbie and he's asking him, hey, you know what happened? And the guy mentioned something about him getting beat up or mugged or whatever in the park. And so Deacon ends up going to Will's room to check on him, and he's quickly able to figure out that this happened because Will might be gay or bi or hooking up with men, and so it doesn't take long for Deacon to realize that this is what's going on because he says that he's been around other friends where that sort of thing has happened. One thing that we left off with in season 2 was that we had Scarlett wanting to leave Nashville because she felt like there was nothing left in Nashville for her. In season 3, we see that moment where Avery and Gunnar are in her car. Avery's upset about something and he just wants to get away from Juliet or whatever, just have a moment of peace. And then we have Gunnar, who's trying to keep Scarlett in Nashville. He won't get out of her car, so they end up driving, and basically he's going on a road trip with her because he wouldn't get out of the car. They end up going maybe like a few towns over, something like that, and Avery gets in trouble because he's at the bar and he's drinking with this woman who's trying to make her boyfriend jealous because her boyfriend is flirting with another woman. The woman goes in for a kiss and Avery kind of puts his hand up to stop her, and the boyfriend sees this and gets really mad, and so he's wanting to come to him and like beat him up, and so they have to like run out of the bar, and everyone's trying to hold him back, and the car doesn't start, and so they're finally able to get away, and then they let the guy go, and he's chasing after the car, and so that was a really funny scene. Eventually leads to Scarlett deciding to drive back to Nashville, and she's not going to be leaving. We also have Joey and Gunnar still having their situation, their relationship, and we have Zoe at some point deciding that she was going to leave for something. I can't recall if she was moving or if it was a gig or whatever. And Gunnar and Scarlett were getting really close, and they were actually throwing her a going away party, and they needed to communicate and like message each other and call each other and stuff like that to kind of like set up the party. And so Zoe got really jealous over this, and I thought that this was very ironic because Zoe did the exact same thing to Scarlett when she started messing with Gunnar, and then now because she knows that she betrayed her friend, she's very quick to assume that Scarlett is betraying her. We also have Scarlett, as a result of staying in Nashville, she is still taking advantage of her publishing deal, and so we see her working at that place that she is working at. I've seen the name on the building, but I just can't recall what it's called at this particular moment. But she's working on a song, and she hears a homeless person kind of like just shouting about pizza outside of her window, and so she hears this like a few times, and she ends up going out to talk to this man. His name is Terry, and I think she offers to give him food or something like that, and then he has heard her singing, and he himself is a singer, And so I think there was a line that she was getting stuck on, or there was something that she couldn't figure out the wording for, and he was able to sing it to her with how she should have worded that particular part of the lyric or whatever, or that particular part of the song. And so he's a good help to her, and they get closer, and she realizes that he's a good singer. He almost made it big, and stuff like that. She attempts to bring him something else, but he doesn't want to take something without having like a job. Like he wants to be rewarded for doing something. He doesn't just want to be given stuff. And so she allows him to clean Deacon's gutters in exchange for food. And then she also volunteers to wash his clothes. And she finds a picture of his family and she tries to talk to him about this. And it comes out that basically he had this opportunity to sing in another state at this event or whatever, and while he was doing that, his family was actually driving down to like see him and support him, and they were killed in a car accident. And so he feels really guilty about that, and he's never been able to kind of like get back into enjoying music at that level of success or whatever, because he associates it with the moment that his family died, and he feels like his family is he's the reason why his family died. What that leads to is we have Avery, Zoe, and Gunnar. They are a band at this point, and so they're performing at something called the Nashville. And Zoe ends up dropping out because at this point she is really frustrated by everything going on with Gunnar and Micah, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I believe. But she's just frustrated by that situation. She moved from her hometown because she didn't want to be a wife, she didn't want to be a housewife. She wanted to make a career for herself. She doesn't really like being in this role that she feels like she's stuck playing as a result of her relationship with Gunnar. She dropped out of the event, and it's just Avery and Gunnar at this point, and they have to figure out how to make it work. What leads to Scarlett kind of stepping in and helping them is that we have this moment where Terry is performing. He's doing really well. The crowd is really into it. They're really engaged with him, and he kind of has this moment that Scarlett had where she freaked out when she was performing, and he just gets really scared and he runs off into the crowd. And so Scarlett's trying to run after him. She's getting blocked, and so she basically loses sight of him, and then she's able to eventually reconnect with him. And at this point he's with other men in the park, and he's gotten drunk or whatever, and she's really trying to help him. She's trying to get him away from the alcohol and stuff like that, but he at this point is fighting her, and he's accusing her of being a liar and a coward because she's pushing on him all of the things that she doesn't want. And so he is what gives her the push to get back on stage and perform again. And she takes advantage of this opportunity because when she was looking for Terry, she ran into Zoe, and Zoe let her know that she was leaving, so that meant that Avery and Gunnar were on their own, and so she knows that they need her, and so she is able to take advantage of this moment, sing with them because she knows all of their songs, and then she's able to kind of get over this stage fright that she has. And so this is where we see the beginning of the band called the X's. They're sometimes referred to as the Triple X's. I actually just like the X's, so I thought that was a great name for their band. So we have a lot of stuff happening with them later that we will get into later on as well. I didn't really talk about this yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and say in season 3 we learned that Deacon has liver cancer, and so we have Scarlett, who is really helping Deacon deal with this and navigate this, and she's going with him to his doctor's appointment. And so we have her starting to get closer with his doctor Caleb, because Deacon has made her not tell anybody about this, and so she doesn't really have anybody else to talk to other than the doctor, and so she goes to him quite a bit to figure out how she can help Deacon. And so they start dating, and Gunnar doesn't know all of the backstory. He just sees her with a new guy, and this is the first time we start to see him getting jealous over Scarlett. Obviously, he had proposed to Scarlett, and then he quickly moved on to Zoe, and so we didn't really know if a relationship was possible between them two again, just because of how quickly he moved on. And so it's really interesting to see him getting jealous over Scarlett, of him not liking the fact that she's hanging out with Caleb, and then we really just see him missing the opportunity to take advantage of the fact that he has this opportunity to still pursue Scarlett, and he's just missing those opportunities. And he's, as a result, is lashing out and reacting badly to different things that she's doing as a result of her dating Caleb. In relation to the band, the other thing that we have happening is that we see the band, they're on the bus, they're going to their next tour destination, and we have Avery getting the news that Juliet is about to give birth. And so you see the bus slam on its brakes, Avery gets off, and it's just Scarlett and Gunnar who are supposed to perform at their next location. And we really see Gunnar kind of trying to figure out how to pursue Scarlett, and what happens is they end up singing a particular song together when it's just the two of them at their next performance, and we have them kind of like really connecting during their performance, and then afterwards Gunnar is basically asking Scarlett if she felt anything, and she uses something that he said, I think either earlier on in the season or in the previous season. She says something to him about all she felt was the music, and this was something that he said to her. There was a time where they started working together again. I think this was shortly after him and Zoe broke up in season 3. They start writing music together, or maybe him and Zoe were still together, but they start working on music together, and Scarlett isn't wanting to work with Gunnar because I think she's starting to like feel feelings again for him, and I think she says something to him about this, and he's like, all I feel is the music, and so she is able to use this against him in that moment when he is trying to win her back. And then lastly, something in relation to the exes. So we have Gunnar and Scarlett getting a recording contract to perform as a group, and they're trying to figure out what label to sign with. They end up signing with Highway 65, and they also start working on new songs, and so they had trouble writing together because they didn't want to talk about their personal lives since they couldn't really get along when it came to that, and so they were struggling to write, and then they kind of just separated. And then I think that Scarlett, when she moved in with Caleb, she was working on a song at night and she sent it to Gunnar, and then I guess Gunnar started working on music to put to the lyrics, and then so when they are at Deacon's surgery, we have this moment where they Gunnar comes to the waiting room. He gives Raina his well wishes for Deacon, and then he asks to talk to Scarlett privately, and they go outside, and for whatever reason he's about to leave to go to Texas with Kylie, and he's asking her to let him hear her sing the song. And so they sing the song. Obviously they get into their feelings when they're singing their personal songs that are kind of sometimes about each other, and they end up kissing, I believe. And so that's kind of one of the areas where we have a cliffhanger to end the season. So the next thing I want to get into is Juliet post-pregnancy. So we have her really wanting to get back to work again. We see her with the baby all the time. She's struggling. Obviously, it's a newborn. There's a lot to adjust to, and she's really kind of like frustrated with the fact that she's home alone with the baby. She's not working, and she really wants to get back into her career. At this time, we have Avery on tour with the band and stuff like that, and so he is not around a lot, and so it's just on her a lot to take care of the baby, and so she gets really frustrated. She at one point ends up hiring a nanny, and we have Avery coming home to see some random lady holding his baby. He is very concerned by this because they never had this conversation, I guess, about having a nanny. And I was very surprised by this. Someone of Juliet's status, you would have expected her to have hired a nanny well before this moment that pushed her to get a nanny, and so I was very surprised by that, and I don't know why it was so controversial. It should have been something that she did much quicker, and it should have been something where the nanny kind of made it easier for her, not that she just dumped all of her mothering responsibilities on the nanny, if that makes sense, which is what she was doing. The next thing I want to get into is that Julia ends up planning a surprise concert on a rooftop in Nashville, and she has all of these lights going, smoke going. She's able to get a helicopter to kind of like maybe film the thing from the sky. We see people down below reacting to, I guess, hearing Juliet, seeing the lights, and so basically it's this outdoor concert where people can hear Juliet, but they may not be able to see her just because of how high up she is. And then you have people in like apartment buildings next to where she's performing on the rooftop, and you have them hanging out on their balconies and just listening to this free concert. And obviously, it was a great idea. The problem is with a lot of things that Juliet does, it's not well thought out in terms of the implications of her plan. So, as a result of this impromptu concert, there are a lot of fines that are issued just because she didn't have permits to do any of this stuff. And so the fines are going to Highway 65, which they're not happy about, but Juliet doesn't see the big issue because she's planning to reimburse them. And the reason why Juliet is doing all of this stuff to kind of get her career back on track is because she feels like Highway 65 is not really doing anything to support her, and she felt like she was going to get this from Raina, and so she's been very disappointed with them in this aspect of her career. Next, we see Juliet. She is with Avery, and as a result of part of the conversation that I was mentioning with Highway 65 getting fined, Juliet and Buddy and Raina are having a conversation about this rooftop and their plans going forward. And for whatever reason, they're talking maybe about like the momentum of the the rooftop performance and where they need to go, and they're talking about how they need an album as like the next step or whatever. And for whatever reason, Juliet's like, fine, I'll have it in 2 days. So it's not like Raina told her that she needed to have a new album in 2 days. It was just something that she planned, and then she totally lied to Avery about it and made it seem like Raina was forcing her to produce an album in 2 days, which was not correct. And so we have Juliet kind of telling Avery about this conversation, how she needs to have an album in 2 days. And so Avery is supposed to do something. I think he's supposed to go to the Bluebird to see Deacon perform, and Juliet says she can't go because she needs to work on her album. She wants to listen to some unfinished music or whatever, and she volunteers to take the baby and watch the baby. And so we have this next scene where Emily comes by, and the sound is kind of muted, but you see Emily like yelling at Juliet. Juliet's not paying attention. She has headphones on. She has no idea what's going on. And then when she takes them off, the sound kind of comes back, and you hear a baby crying in the background. You hear Emily kind of questioning Juliet about what she's doing, and Juliet says something about how when a baby's crying, you're supposed to let them cry. And then she leaves to go somewhere and basically leaves Emily with the baby, Cadence. Emily ends up calling Avery and telling him that the baby hadn't been changed or fed in hours, and so they know that something is seriously wrong because Juliet is basically doing everything she can to avoid spending time with the baby. So what this leads to is a intervention for Juliet. They're really trying to figure out and understand what's going on with her. At this point, she's been super rude to everyone. She normally is rude to everyone, but this is like, instead of a 10 out of 10, this is like a 20 out of 10. So she is really nuts with everything as far as like her behavior, how she's talking to people, and just everything that she's doing. And so I think they get her doctor involved, and they realize that she probably has postpartum depression. She refuses to engage in any of this. She's upset for them. She's upset with them for having this intervention. She doesn't want to listen. She leaves and goes back to her studio, and she's not taking any of this serious. And then we have Avery continuing to try to get through to Juliet, but she continues to refuse to engage with him, and she just, at every moment she can, she just walks away from the baby when he's trying to get her to hold the baby or talk to the baby or acknowledge the baby. She's always trying to run off to do something for her career. What this leads to is Juliet going to Highway 65 with her album. She has it already and prepared in the 2 days that she was given, and we have Raina kind of being happy about the album, but she tells Juliet basically that she needs to slow down. She just had a baby, and she's moving basically way too fast for where she is in her life as far as being a new mom and having a lot of responsibilities with that. And so Juliet gets really offended. She's pissed off. She takes the album back from Raina, says she doesn't deserve it, and then she basically goes to Jeff and she asked him to be her new manager because she knows that he doesn't really care about her mental state, but he will do everything that he can to make her the next star or whatever. Because at this point that this conversation is happening, Jeff has done a lot to turn Layla's career around, and she really wants to take advantage of that for herself. And then this is what I was referring to at the beginning of this episode, where I said that I made the connection on why Avery was so upset. She cheated on him with Jeff, and then here she is involving Jeff in their lives again when he's basically been blackballed from everywhere on the country music scene in Nashville. And so he sees this kind of like as another betrayal from Juliet because she's already abandoning their child. She's not taking care of their child, and then she's doing everything she can to put her career ahead of him and the baby. And we see this moment where Juliet is sleeping on the couch. She got in late. Avery has the baby, and he's trying to take this doctor's advice to kind of mention everything well and positive and good that Juliet is doing to kind of help reconnect her to the baby. And so he's doing that. He wants Juliet to hold the baby, but she's rushing off. They get into a fight, and then Juliet's like, well, let me hold the baby. And he's like, no, I'm not just going to give you the baby to prove a point or whatever. And so he won't give her the baby to hold. And so she ends up picking up like a snow globe, and she throws it at Avery, and he has to duck in order to keep it from hitting him. And at this moment, Juliet knows that she has done something wrong, and Avery just tells her to go ahead and get out of the house. And so we have Juliet just, again, even though she's going through a lot as a new mom and she most likely does have postpartum depression, she is just really not likable in this season. And there's just a lot that contributes to it. And this probably is one of her biggest mistakes this season. As a result of that happening, we have Juliet coming home. She has just performed with as an opener at Luke's concert. Obviously, Jeff helped her to orchestrate that. She's also just signed with Luke's new label, Wheeling Dealing Records. And so she comes home. She's happy about all of her success so far. She even bought a new snow globe to replace the one that she broke. And then we have Avery kind of just sitting there. He's clearly upset, and he's just talking to her about all of the things that she's doing. He's letting her know that the baby's not safe around her, the baby is somewhere else, and he's basically begging Juliet to go see a doctor to kind of fix herself and get better, and she's refusing to really hear what he's saying. And then we see Avery kind of asking her if her career is more important than him and the baby, and she doesn't really answer until he has his answer that yes, the career is more important than them. He ends up walking away with the bag that he's packed, and presumably he is moving out with the baby. The next thing I want to talk about is Will and Layla, and so we have them staged as like a PR relationship, PR couple, just to help each other's image. And so we know that they're involved with the reality show, and we have Will outing himself to Layla, telling her that he is gay, and we know that this was caught on camera. And so they are eventually approached by one of the producers of the show, and she shows them the photos of Will saying that he was gay, and uses this to blackmail them into continuing to film the reality show. I want to make the point that what Will is doing to Layla is exactly what Juliet did to Sean. She was in a relationship with Sean, and she married him under false pretenses. And then we have Will doing the same thing with Layla. He is trying to cover up the fact that he's gay by having a fake relationship with someone else who doesn't really know that the relationship is fake. And so you have Layla talking about how she was never really intimate with someone before. The first person was with Will, and he doesn't really know this, and he should obviously feel guilty about this because he is only in this relationship for one reason, and that is to protect his image. And so I thought it was very interesting how there was that parallel between him and Juliet, even though they're kind of not really the same person personality wise. But there was a lot about Will that was annoying this season because I know that he is dealing with a lot mentally as far as being gay and not wanting to really accept everything that comes with that, as far as how people will perceive him and how people will treat him if they know that he is gay. But I also was not a huge fan of his in this season because he was really willing to hurt other people just to protect his career, and after a certain point it just wasn't cool anymore. So as a result of all of this going on, they're forced to do the reality show. We have Layla eventually blackmailing Will to get her way. She really wants to make it as a singer, as an artist, and be really successful, and so she's forcing him to use his influence as a new artist at Ed Show and to use the power that he has to make things happen for her, or she will out him. And so this leads to Will kind of going to Jeff and trying to get him to do more for Layla, get her a gold single, get her awesome songs that she can record, and this is the route that she's going to kind of try to find happiness for herself in the situation where she is basically trapped in because of everything going on with Will. We also see Layla really starting to break down from this relationship and the pressure of being on a reality show because she, along with Will, is having to fake this 24/7 that they're a happy couple, that there's nothing wrong, that they love each other, and so she's just really breaking down. She's drinking a lot, she's lashing out, she's reacting badly in public, and she's just punishing Will as much as she can. And we do kind of have this full circle moment because we had this moment, I think, maybe in season 1 or 2, where Layla came to Gunnar because she wanted to write a song, but she didn't really have anything to say. And so Gunnar gave her a hard time about this, and she felt really badly. And so now we have Layla going through all of these life experiences with Will, with being in the music industry, and she finally has something to say, and she's able to start writing her own music. He ends up performing this really sad song in front of Gunnar and Zoe and Will, and at that performance, Gunnar is just really impressed with the song that she's able to come up with because she really does have a voice now, and that voice has come from all of the hurt that she has experienced as a result of everything that has happened to her. We then see this moment where Layla starts sleeping with Jeff, and she's just going further and further down this path of doing anything she can to find happiness. And so she knows that Jeff is aware that Will is gay or whatever, and so she feels like this is her chance to kind of like be happy, to be with someone who can help her career and stuff like that. And so she really latches on to Jeff, and Jeff kind of plays into this a little bit too much, considering that he's way too old for her and that he hadn't taken her seriously, and so this relationship is not going to be something that's good for her in the long run. And we do have this moment where the three of them are at this party, and Layla is hanging all over Jeff, and people see that this is happening. We also have rumors kind of floating out there that Will is gay, and so Will goes to Jeff and tells Jeff that he has to break off things with Layla because he needs his wife with him to restore his image and stuff like that, and she can't be seen with another man because that doesn't help the rumors that are out there about him being gay if he's having problems in his fake marriage. And so we see the scene where Jeff breaks up with Layla, and she's really hysterical. He ends up giving her pills to kind of calm her down and manage her anxiety. He ends up walking away from her, and Will sees this conversation from the balcony. I don't know if he was there to watch them or if they just happened, if he was there and they just happened to come sit down in front of him, but whatever, he sees this conversation happening, and then he is in the room, and another woman that had been talking to earlier in the party is basically forcing herself on him, and he doesn't want to hook up with her, but then she says something about, oh, well, I guess the rumors are true, I guess you're gay, and stuff like that. And so he sleeps with this woman to prove that he's not gay. And one thing I was confused about, because obviously he's able to perform for women, so I wasn't sure if he was more bi than he was gay, like completely just like into men, because obviously he's able to have those relationships with women. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But anyway, so he is engaged in intimate relations with this woman, and Layla has come upstairs looking for him, and she actually sees him hooking up with this woman. And so that is a blow to her confidence because up until this point, her and Will are not intimate like that. She kind of feels like she's not able to satisfy him, and it has a lot to do with her being young, and then also the fact that he is into guys. And so she's really hurt to see him with another woman and see him like enjoying himself, I guess. And so she takes a great offense to this, and she ends up taking a bunch of pills and she overdoses. And we see Will kind of later on looking for her. He runs into Jeff there looking for her, and then you see the camera pan to this pool. There's somebody in the pool, and it's Layla, and she has obviously somehow fallen into the pool, and she's face down, and she's not in good shape. The next thing I want to talk about is Jeff. And so Jeff is doing a lot this season to get back at Raina, and he is going through Teddy to do all of this. So Raina hurt him by signing Sadie, and so now he is like everyone's fair game, and he's going directly after Raina's daughters, Maddie and Daphne. And so what he starts to do is manipulate Jeff so that he can eventually get himself in the position to where he is signing the girls to Edge Hill. He has lawyers do the research and he finds out that he only needs one parent's consent. He's going to manipulate Teddy so that he can have Teddy's consent. And so the reason why he wants to sign the girls is because one, they're talented, and two, he needs to have a good quarter the next quarter, and he wants to do this to impress his bosses. What he does to Teddy is he sets him up with an escort. Teddy is oblivious to this. He just thinks that he's hanging out with Jeff, he's meeting two women, and he's actually having a good time with this woman, Natasha. And then at some point we have Teddy hanging out with Jeff like another time with Natasha, and Natasha and her friend leave, and then Teddy's talking about how the woman listened to him and how she was just really great, and then Jeff says something about her being good at her job, and then it kind of comes out that Natasha is an escort. And so Teddy's really upset by this because he didn't know that was the situation, but he also continues to hang out with Natasha just because he really likes the bond that they had. And it's also very similar to what he did with Megan, and then also what he did with Peggy, to where he got really attached, and then once they hooked up, he kept pursuing these women and trying to like force them to have a conversation with him and force them to admit that they had chemistry or whatever. And so we've seen this behavior a lot from Teddy. Then we have this moment where Teddy is talking to Natasha, and they're talking about making the arrangement more formal or just like upping the ante, whatever. They call it the girlfriend experience, and he realizes that this is not what he wants, and he realizes that Natasha is the only person that he has to talk to about what's going on in his life, but he is paying her to do this, and he's not happy about that. And then the other thing that Jeff uses to kind of like manipulate Teddy is that he calls Teddy when Layla is found in the pool and she's overdosed. He calls Teddy to basically have him use his power and influence to cover up everything that happened and to kind of get all of the charges dropped. And so this is another thing that Jeff has on Teddy, but at the same time, I think this is more of Jeff just going to Teddy for like a favor. It had nothing to do with him like using that information somehow against Teddy. That's a really weird thing to say, but I really think he was just going to Teddy as a friend, because what he did end up blackmailing him with is using his mayor's salary to pay for an escort. And so I don't think he would have held that hey, you covered up an overdose or whatever thing over his head. So we have Teddy at this point signing the contract for Maddie. He's forced to. And then we have Raina finding out about this because Jeff has a very expensive necklace sent over to Highway 65 for Maddie, but he directly sends it to Raina to kind of provoke her and let her know that he now has control over Maddie or whatever, and there's nothing that she can do about it. And so she ends up going to Jeff, she confronts him, and he tells her that it's an ironclad contract, there's nothing she can do, and that he has Teddy's permission, and that's all he needs. And so we do have Teddy and Raina having a conversation about this, and at some point Teddy kind of fesses up to why he had to sign the paperwork, and that it was that Jeff had blackmailed him over the escort, and then the fact that he helped Jeff cover up everything that happened with Layla. And so I was really happy that Teddy was honest with Raina about all of this, because he could have just kept it to himself and not even been willing to admit that to Raina, because that information was what allowed her to confront Jeff in front of his boss and kind of get the contract thrown out. So I was really glad that that was a moment where he was willing to be honest, because that is what ended up helping their daughter get out of that situation that she didn't even know about. With that being said, the way that Raina went after Jeff once she had all that information was epic, because I think at that point she knew that there was nothing that she could do about the contract, but then her next step was to get Teddy's parental rights revoked and kind of have them restored or given to Deacon, being that Deacon was her biological father, Maddie's biological father. And then that is when Teddy confessed everything that was going on. And so we do see that Teddy is told to bring Maddie to a 10 a.m. meeting so that she can meet the boss of Edge Hill, whatever. And instead of Maddie and Teddy coming, we have Raina coming to that meeting. And at that meeting, Raina is able to out Jeff for blackmailing Teddy, for forcing Maddie into a contract that she didn't even know about, and then for what happened with Layla and her overdose. And so hearing all of that information is what leads to the contract getting thrown out, and it leads to Jeff getting fired, and it also leads to Edge Hill getting dissolved. The Edge Hill, the musical part of it being dissolved. And what's really annoying about all of this is a huge win for Raina and the Conrad family. She was able to get Maddie out of this horrible contract. And then we have Teddy, who is also a very annoying character in like all 3 seasons because he is so worried about Jeff. Like I guess he feels like Jeff can still blackmail him or whatever. And so he's so focused on making sure that Jeff is okay. And what I want to point out is that when Raina outed Jeff to his boss, she didn't say anything about Teddy and escorts. She only talked about how Jeff forced Teddy to cover up what happened to Layla. And so we have this moment where Teddy and Jeff meet up, or rather, Jeff is out and Teddy is able to find him and kind of force a conversation. And we see Jeff manipulate Teddy because he tells Teddy that basically Raina told his business to his boss, and so now his boss and whoever his boss has told knows about the things that Teddy did, which is actually not true. He didn't mention the part about the escorts, and so this is Jeff manipulating Teddy, and Teddy's falling for it because he was too overly concerned about what was going on with Jeff. As a result of this, what happens is that Teddy ends up going to Natasha's house. He wants them to get their story straight, but what he doesn't know is that the feds are actually outside of Natasha's house and they're able to hear everything that he's saying. So he's officially caught on tape, in part of an investigation into a prostitution ring. He's caught on tape trying to get his story straight and kind of showing or establishing connections to the person that they are investigating. As a result of this, what we have happening is that Natasha at some point realizes that she's under investigation. She goes to Teddy and tells him about this, and then she says, hey, I need help leaving town, you need to get me this money. And so she's basically blackmailing Teddy into helping her, because if he doesn't help her, she's going to get arrested and she's going to out him. And so Teddy is forced to kind of find a solution to all of it, and he basically finds a way to get money for a special project and then use that money to give to her so that she can get out of town. And so we do see this come full circle to where once Teddy's able to get the money and he gives it to her, we then see that she was mic'd up and she was basically setting him up to be responsible for this happening, and he could get charged. And so he eventually realizes through a conversation later on with Natasha that she set him up, and he's trying to figure out how to deal with this. And he's planning to leave, and then he is approached by Dash, a federal agent who was previously involved with Candy and Lamar as far as like investigating the Wyatt family, and he gives him a deal to kind of basically get somebody else caught up legally, and then that's the route that he goes to kind of get himself cleared of any charges. And then once he realizes that Candy's kind of wrapped up in this new investigation, he doesn't want to be an informant or help them get the evidence that they need, and then Dash ends up arresting Teddy, and we don't really see what happens with that in the rest of this season. So the next thing we have happening is Sadie. We have the introduction of Sadie. Sadie is a new artist, and this is someone that Jeff wants to sign, and he's pursuing her really heavily. She ends up getting connected with Raina, and Raina is able to convince her to sign with Highway 65, and she does this at the last minute. And so Sadie is having a performance where she's announcing the new record label that she is signing with, and Jeff is there in anticipation that she's going to announce that she's signing with Edge Hill, and she ends up signing with Highway 65 at the last minute. And this was prior to everything with Raina and Maddie and Teddy, just to throw that out there in case you're a little bit confused. We also have Sadie working with Avery to produce her next album. She initially wants to work with someone who can give her like a fresh and new sound, and Avery's name comes up, and so she's able to get a meeting with him. But Juliet crashes the meeting because she hears about him meeting with some hot person, and she thinks that he's dating someone else or whatever. So she shows up to spy on him, and then she ends up knocking things over, and it is a disaster, and she almost ruins his chances of working with Sadie, but she's able to get a meeting with Sadie and let her know that Avery is such a good producer and that she would be missing out if she didn't work with him. And so she is able to basically give Avery another chance at getting that producing gig. We also learn that Sadie has an abusive ex-husband named Peter, and he has come out of the woodwork to get a cut of her success. We see him showing up to different places that she's at, and we see this one moment where she's walking up to her door and he comes up from behind her and he just flat out punches her. And so I really wasn't expecting to see that on camera, but it was just really brutal to see how abusive he was and how he used everything he could to intimidate her and to terrify her. So as a result of this happening, we see Sadie with a huge bruise. She ends up going to a gun shop to arm herself with a weapon. She was asked to show ID, but she just took her glasses off. The woman saw her bruise, and I don't know if the woman also recognized her, but that was basically her way of being able to get a gun without showing really any official paperwork. We then have Sadie filing a restraining order against Pete. He quickly violates this, and then he ends up filing a lawsuit against her, and this leads to her looping Raina into everything that's happening. Avery also saw all of this happening, and so he actually went outside to confront Peter, and Peter was going to try to like fight Avery, but then she came out and said, "Hey, you're on camera and you're within 100 feet of me. You need to go away, or I'm gonna basically turn you in for this or whatever." And so we have the lawsuit happening, and they quickly decide to just go ahead and settle. So they give him 500K, and then we have at the end of that meeting where they sign the paperwork that they're going to settle basically, we have Raina using her actual and real power to challenge him, and you can see that he's really threatened by this, which I was so happy that Raina stood up to him because he definitely should not be able to get away with what he's doing to Sadie. We then have Sadie doing a Good Morning America interview, and I'm really proud of her in this moment because she outs Peter as being a abuser, and I think the reason why she did this was because the night before maybe she saw a news story on TV where a woman and maybe her husband were dead and it was an issue regarding domestic violence, and so she really wanted to use her voice and speak out and not let Peter get away with what he was doing to her. As a result of this, we have Peter waiting for Sadie in the garage. She had been in the studio, heard Luke singing, and she kind of helped him with the song to add like a second voice to it. She didn't commit to singing on the song with him, but she helped him basically improve the song. So they decided to go out for coffee, kind of like as a thank you. They were talking for hours, and then when it was time to go, they went to the parking garage. He was going to walk her to her car, but she said that she was fine. And so we see Luke getting in the elevator, and he presumably goes to his car. We then see Sadie walk into her car. She is startled or stopped by Pete, who called out to her, something like that. And we see her panicking. She's reaching for her gun. They're struggling over the gun, and you hear a gunshot go off, and then you're not really sure who has gotten shot, and it's actually Peter who has been shot. And then we see Luke come around with his car. She sees Sadie standing over Pete with a gun in her hand, and him on the ground, and just Sadie shaking. And so he is coming into this horrible scene, and then as a result of that, they are called into the police station and they are questioned, and it's clear that the cops don't really believe Sadie. And so what ends up happening is Luke basically lies and says that he saw the whole thing, and so this is what allows Sadie to get the charges dropped against her or lessened against her, because there's an eyewitness who was able to prove that what she did was in self-defense. And it's so crazy how this happened because obviously Pete was violating the restraining order by coming near her, and that should have been evidence of it being self-defense since he shouldn't have been near her, but they were just so intent on basically making sure that she got the punishment that she deserved. And so I felt really bad for her in that moment, but I'm glad that Luke really stepped up for her and kind of lied because the book probably would have been thrown at her, even though what she did was perfectly in self-defense. As a result of all of this happening, we have Sadie realizing that she's basically in the clear. There's a lesser charge that's like a misdemeanor or something like that in relation to the gun, but she's basically free as far as legal punishment, and she decides to go ahead and leave town, and that is the last that we see of Sadie. The next one I'm going to get into is Raina's Rolling Stone cover. So we have Luke and Raina heavily dating at this point. They're also engaged to be married, and so as a result of them not only just dating but them being engaged, they are getting a lot of press. They are country music's new power couple. They're the new it couple, and so Raina's life is at a completely different level as far as paparazzi and attention that she's getting because of the star power that Luke has, and she has her own star power, but Luke is just at another level because of all of like the marketing and deals and stuff like that that he had, and so they are introduced to a more chaotic and crazy lifestyle. So as a result of Marina and Luke touring, they don't have much time that they can spend together, and so they're really trying to figure out, based on their tour dates, when they can get married and stuff like that. And so they do have this one weekend where they can have family weekend, and so that Luke and Raina spending time with their kids. And what happens is, this is supposed to be a family weekend, but Raina is offered the cover of Rolling Stone, and she takes advantage of it. But that reporter can only come that weekend that they're having their family weekend. They can't push it back, whatever. And so she's forced to kind of have this reporter around her 24/7, whatever, while they are writing this article for the cover. And what happens is we have Luke and Raina at home. The reporter is with them, and we see this moment where they go into this room because somebody left the stereo on, and they see Maddie and Colt kissing. And this is obviously a huge issue because Maddie and Colt are going to be stepbrother and stepsister, so they shouldn't be hooking up. Obviously, they're not related, but the fact is, with Raina and Luke getting married and the kids presumably going to live in one house together, they can't be that close. And so this presents a huge problem. And Raina and Luke don't want the reporter to write about Maddie and Colt, and so she has to give them another story, and she gives them her relationship with Deacon, which Deacon is not happy about at all because she had talked about how she was never going to sell them and their story to the press like that, and she did that to protect their daughter. The next thing that we have happening is Gunnar has a kid, and so I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but we have Gunnar and Zoe dating. They're at some party at a barn. Maddie is there as well. Scarlett is there, and Gunnar runs into his first girlfriend from back home in Texas. And at some point, he is getting reacquainted with Kylie, who was his first girlfriend, and then they kind of like make plans to like hang out, meet up again, and whatever. And so he is at her work. She's a waitress in a diner or something like that. And there's this kid comes in and he calls Kylie mom and stuff like that. And so Gunnar realizes that she has a kid. And so with Avery having his own child, somehow this triggers something in Gunnar to ask Kylie if Micah is hers, just because of the age of the kid and everything with Avery. And so he does end up asking her if Micah is his, and she says yes. And the reason why he wants to know if he has a kid is because he doesn't have any other family. And so if he does have family out there, he wants to know if Micah is his. And so he gets that confirmation that Micah is his. And so you see them kind of balancing kind of childcare responsibilities, and you see Gunnar spending more time with Micah. The problem is Kylie previously had mentioned that she had met somebody out of town. She had wanted to move there with Micah to be with that person, but that person didn't know that she had a kid. And so at one point, you have Gunnar and Zoe kind of like complaining about how Kylie is not showing up on time to pick Micah, and she's kind of relying on them too much to do the thing that she should be responsible for. And then you have her completely just taking off and going to that new boyfriend or wherever he is, and she leaves Micah behind with Gunnar. And the reason why she does this is because that boyfriend had found out that she had a kid and didn't want to be involved with her, and so she left her kid behind to see if that relationship could still work. And then this is something that Zoe is getting frustrated by because at this point, her and Gunnar are still in a relationship. Gunnar has purchased his new house. She's living there with him, and she feels like she now has the responsibilities of helping Gunnar take care of his kid, and that's not what she wants to do. She wants to be in Nashville to make a career for herself. We then have Gunnar finding out that he's actually not Micah's dad. The reason why this happens is because Kylie's parents show up and they come to collect Micah, and they have some type of paperwork that allows them to take Micah. And so Gunnar gets a lawyer, and that lawyer tells him to do a DNA test to establish paternity, and it comes back that Micah is not his kid, but they are related. So this means that Micah is Jason's kid. So right away, Gunnar thinks that Kylie cheated on him. She's not around, so he can't really ask her for confirmation at this point. And so he's just really upset because he is finding out that his first girlfriend cheated on him with his brother, and he's really upset by this. As a result of him not being Micah's father, this lessens his chances of Micah being able to stay with him. But then at some point, he has to tell Micah, who is calling him dad, that he's not actually his dad, he's his uncle. And so Micah doesn't take this news well, and he feels like Gunnar has lied to him. He immediately wants to be with his grandparents, he wants to live with them, and he doesn't want anything to do with Gunnar. And so at this point, that situation sort of dissolves, and Gunnar is still dealing with the betrayal of thinking that his first girlfriend cheated on him. And what we actually find out happened was that Kylie was basically at a party with Jason and Gunnar. She had gotten drunk, she had gone upstairs to sleep, and she was actually raped by Jason, and she wasn't sure who the father was. And so when Gunnar told her that Jason was the father, that was like the first that she had heard of it. She really wanted it to be Gunnar's child, and she convinced herself that it was Gunnar's kid. And so we see that kind of coming full circle. Next up, I want to talk about the CMA Awards. So this was the most interesting part for me, and this was the part where I got really, really frustrated with Luke. Like, I started to not like him as much, and the reason why was because Luke and Raina, obviously the power couple at this point, they were both nominated for awards in the same category, so it was a matter of which one of them would win. And so Raina basically won 6 out of 6 awards. I think Luke maybe won 1 or 2, but Raina beat him in every category. So he only won the categories that were all male, and then she won the categories that were male and female, if that makes sense. And so basically, she had a much better night than him. And what started to go wrong was that she won her first award, and it was for a song that she wrote with Deacon. And obviously, in her thank you speech, she's going to thank the people who contributed to the song. And so she was like, I really have to make sure I thank Deacon Claiborne. And so obviously, the way that she said it, the camera went to Luke at this point. You're expecting her to thank her fiance or something like that, but she thanks Deacon Claiborne, which makes sense because he helped her to write the song. And then we see her next award, which is for like her album. And again, Luke is expecting her to say something about him, but she thanks Liam McGinnis, who was the person who worked on the album with her. And so he is just really struggling with the fact that all of these other men are being thanked before him. And so we do see this moment where they win an award together, and so they both go on stage and he does all of the talking, and then he makes some sort of dig about how the award was for Ball and Chain, and he basically takes credit for them making this song together, even though, if you remember, she heard Gunnar and Scarlett singing, went outside to listen to see what was going on, and then he was like, oh no, he's making it, he's making me a hit song. And then she's like, a hit duet. And so she was the one who made the song a duet, and then it was even though it was initially a song for him, she was the one who kind of made it into something bigger. And so he takes credit for all of Ball and Chain's success, and then he talked about how basically the song doing well, and then maybe him proposing to her or something like that, him being involved with her, helped her album to pop. He's just making these digs at her, and then he doesn't let her speak. And so you have Scarlett and Deacon watching this at home on TV, and they notice that he's behaving like this, and they don't like it at all. And so I just thought that was a really bad moment for Luke, and it made me just not like him. And then we have this moment where they're sitting in the stand. Luke is upset about something, and he ends up kind of going to the bathroom. She follows him. They get into a fight, and he basically says that her album only did well because he proposed to her on the same day. And so he's really just taking cheap shots at her. She walks out, and then later on when they're at home, he kind of like apologizes for his behavior. He did not like her success, but he also didn't like the fact that her success was because of other men. It wasn't just because of him. And I think that that was something that he really felt like from an ego perspective that he made Raina James who she was at this point. Next, what we have happening is that Raina comes to her senses and she calls off the wedding. We've seen little moments here and there where people are questioning Raina on if marrying Luke is what she wants to do, how she feels about Deacon, that sort of thing. And so she ends up going to Luke the day of the wedding and she tells him that this is not right for her, she needs to call it off. And Luke is really, really upset. He tells her to get off his property, he's throwing things, and then so she leaves and she calls, I think, Bucky to tell him what's going on, and then he had already heard about it from Luke's manager, and so this was going to be really, really bad. And so then we see this moment where Luke gets in his car, he crashes the cake, and then he goes off to Deacon's house. He basically just storms into Deacon's house. He's looking for Raina, and Deacon doesn't know why he's there, and then he realizes that he's there because she called off the wedding. And then we have Deacon kind of kicking Luke out of his house, and then Luke says something about how he never should have went sniffing around that bee, and then Deacon's like, what did you say? And he punches him. And so I really hated Luke in that moment because the whole thing was an ego pissing contest for him to be like, I'm better than Teddy, I'm better than Deacon, especially because I'm the one who's ending up with Raina this time around or whatever. And then the minute that he loses her, he's very quick to insult her. Obviously, I understand that he's hurt, but that was just really disgusting from him. And so I'm glad that Deacon put him in his place. While this is happening, we have Deacon out of town and he is seeing everywhere newspaper articles about the upcoming wedding, and Scarlett actually finds him face down on the floor. The room is trashed, and so she probably thinks that he took alcohol and stuff like that. And so they get him to the hospital, and his blood is clean. He didn't take alcohol, but they find out that he has an issue with his liver. He has liver cancer, and so at the time that she's called off the wedding, Deacon is dealing with all of these health issues, and he doesn't really want to go to Raina in this condition where he can't really take care of her because she's always been taking care of him, and so he doesn't want Raina. He doesn't want to win Raina in that way. He doesn't want her to feel sorry for him because he's now sick, and so he kind of waits for Raina to come to him. As a result of the news breaking that they are not getting engaged, you have paparazzi going crazy. We have people outside of Raina's gates, and so she ends up going to her gates and giving a small statement to say that they called off the wedding, they're gonna try to be friends and maintain their friendship and stuff like that. And so she gives a really nice statement about what's going on, and Luke is upset by this because obviously anything he says after that is gonna sound petty and bitter and stuff like that. And so he ends up throwing a party at his house since he already basically has everything set up for the wedding, and so he doesn't want all of that to go to waste, and so he throws a big party at his house. One of the petty things that he does do is he sends Raina the bill for everything because it was supposed to be covered by People Magazine, and now that they're not getting married, People Magazine isn't going to cover the expenses, and so he's expecting her to pay them. And I don't know if we got to the bottom of who paid that. They kind of just threw that out there, but they didn't really kind of come full circle with that. The next point I want to talk about is going back to the end of Edge Hill. So after Raina had outed Jeff to his boss, this led to Edge Hill kind of dissolving their music department. And basically what happens is Jeff gets fired, and then the music department dissolved, and then all of the artists are freed from their contracts. So what this means is that all of these artists can now sign with different labels. And so this is a huge opportunity for Highway 65 because they can sign a bunch of artists who previously were not available because they were under contract already. And so one of the artists that Highway 65 signs is Layla. This is facilitated a lot by Jeff because at this point, Jeff is kind of blackballed in the music scene in Nashville, but he's still able to kind of connect with Layla and kind of influence her to pursue different opportunities. And so she ends up going to the Highway 65 offices. She doesn't really have an appointment, but she's waiting there basically like Will did for her opportunity to meet with Raina and Bucky and to kind of pitch herself on why she should be signed to Highway 65. And so they end up signing her not knowing that she is involved with Jeff. but we'll see how that plays out a little bit later. Then we have Will signing with Luke and Jeff, who was kind of also working with Luke at that point. Luke hadn't heard about Jeff's role in everything that happened with Edgehill, and then once he put feelers out, he realized that nobody wanted to work with Jeff, and so he had to basically cut Jeff loose and not have him work with him at Wheeling and Dealing Records because he didn't want to be blackballed in the industry by association. Will still signed with Luke, and he got paired with this gay songwriter, Kevin, and so he's initially uncomfortable working with him because he doesn't want to be gay, I guess, by association, and he doesn't want Kevin touching him in certain ways and stuff like that. And so Kevin is able to pick up on this, and then he kind of wants to end the relationship. We have them going their separate ways, but then we also have Will kind of figuring out that he can't do this on his own, and so he has to go back to Kevin and basically ask him to continue working with him so that they can continue to produce music for his new album. We also have Will starting to date Kevin while they're working on this new album. Eventually, once they're kind of like closer to finishing the project, and so they end up going away on vacation together, and what happens is tabloids get pictures of them kind of not in compromising position, but we see a picture of like maybe Will shirtless and the guy's next to him, and then we see another picture with Will's arm around Kevin, and so obviously the implication of these types of pictures is that they're gay, they're in a relationship and whatever, and so we have Luke's people getting a heads up on this, and Luke is really surprised by this because he didn't know that Will was gay. He goes and confronts Jeff and asks Jeff if he knew. Obviously, Jeff did, and he was able to manage his situation. And so he throws this in Luke's face, and Luke is really upset with him. And then he tells Jeff that he lost a friend over not being honest about the situation. Around the same time, we have Will's dad showing up, and they kind of like make their amends, but it's under false pretenses. Will's father is only comfortable with him. Will's father, Bill, is only comfortable with him because he's seeing his son on TV as this ladies' man. He's seeing him married, and he's seeing him as this huge country star, so he's thinking that he's a straight man now, and so he's not really accepting of Luke. He's not really accepting of Will. He just thinks that Will has made a complete change and is no longer gay or whatever. Kevin is really upset by this because he thinks that this is not genuine. He understands that Will's dad doesn't really accept him. He's just accepting him under false pretenses. And so, as a result of this story coming out, Luke and Will meet and they talk about the photos. Will is still trying to deny that he's gay and all of this stuff. He's trying to figure out how to spin the story, and so they decide either to go with the truth that he is gay, or they just deny that there's anything romantic going on and that they were just working on new material. And so this leads to Kevin being told by Will to basically deny that there's a romantic relationship and to also deny that Will is gay. And so we see Will holding this press conference. We see Kevin speaking, and he's talking about how he's gay, but that it was just a professional relationship. And then we see Will getting up onto the stage. His dad is in the audience. Kevin is walking out. Will is making jokes about how they have a story wrong, and then instead of denying that he's gay, he actually just comes out and he admits that one, Kevin lied, and then two, he admits that he is gay, and he's directly challenging his father when he says this. And I thought this was a great moment for Will because prior to that, he was eating with his dad. His dad saw two gay men embracing, and he said that he lost his appetite, and Will didn't know what he was talking about and looked over and saw what his father was reacting to, and so in that moment, he knew that Kevin was right. And so I'm glad that he used that press conference kind of to stand up for himself and to say F you to his father because his father doesn't accept him and he was just doing it because he thought that Will was straight now. So the next thing I want to get into is Raina's Opry anniversary. So we have, at this point, Deacon and Raina have not really seen each other, and this is again after Raina has called off the wedding and Deacon is dealing with his health diagnosis, and so he hasn't really seen Raina or Maddie. And so Maddie definitely notices that he's been distant with her and not really around, and she doesn't really know why all of this is happening, and she thinks it's because of everything that's going on with Raina and Deacon. And so at her Opry anniversary, she ends up inviting Deacon to sing on stage with her and the girls. And we have both Teddy and Luke at this event. And so obviously we're seeing Luke reacting negatively to the fact that Deacon is always around. And so we have this moment where her girls are singing by themselves and maybe with Deacon, I'm not 100% sure. And then Raina has her own chance to sing by herself, and she calls Deacon to sing on stage with her, and he definitely grants her wish or whatever. And then they sing together, and then he immediately leaves right after this performance, and everyone is confused by this. Maddie isn't sure why he's leaving, and then Raina is looking around for him and she can't find him, and so she's just really confused by what has happened. And so we do have Raina figuring out where Deacon is, and she shows up at the cabin and she's trying to figure out what's going on with him. And then we have Deacon at some point revealing that he has liver cancer, and so Raina initially slapped him because she's like so shocked and upset by the news. She apologizes, they hug, they cry, and stuff like that. And Deacon at this point is trying to get her to leave because he feels like she can't really do anything for him, and he doesn't want her to feel like she has to take care of him. And so he's trying to get her to leave. She refuses to leave, and then he says like, you know, nothing matters, and then she starts breaking his guitars and stuff like that. And then she stops short of that, and she realizes that nothing she says is going to change his mind, and so she basically leaves at that point. Next, what we have happening is Maddie learns of Deacon's diagnosis. We have Deacon and Raina making the decision that they're going to be together, and so they decide to tell Maddie and Daphne together about his health situation, and obviously Maddie's really upset. Daphne is comforting Maddie, and we see Maddie starting to get really distant. She doesn't want to talk to Deacon. She doesn't want to be around him. When she's at his house, she just shuts herself up in Scarlett's room. She's really angry. She doesn't want to talk, and she even calls Teddy to come and get her and come and pick her up. And this is big because during this time, Teddy is not allowed to see the girls, and so obviously they haven't been staying with him, and so she calls Teddy to come and get her. Deacon is confused when Daphne tells him that Teddy is outside, and so he goes out to confront him, and he's basically saying, you know, Maddie's not leaving, she shouldn't have called you, blah blah blah. And so Deacon has to come out and tell Teddy what's going on, and then Teddy gives him father to father advice and just tells him that the more he pushes Maddie to open up, she's just gonna pull further and further away. And so he ends up going to talk to Maddie and kind of really getting to the bottom of everything that she's feeling. And she eventually apologizes to Deacon for how she's acting. And he says, you know, it's understandable, just don't shut me out, basically. Then we learn that while all of this is going on, Maddie has continued to hang out with Colt. She's dating him, and we did see a scene where Luke and Colt were having a conversation about Colt wanting to live at home permanently and go to school in the local area. And so we find out that they have been hanging out together. We have this moment where Raina needs to drop something off at the school. She forgot it, whatever, and she pulls up to see Maddie and Colt kissing, and so she's really surprised by this, and she ends up approaching Luke about it, and they have a conversation about how Maddie and Colt have been seeing each other for a few weeks, that Colt moved back home, and that Maddie had even been coming out to the ranch to hang out. What this leads to is so Maddie and Colt continue hanging out, and we have this moment where Deacon, I don't know why he wasn't at his house, but he wasn't at his house. He hears a noise and he goes to Scarlett's room because he thinks it's Scarlett, and he sees Maddie and Colt getting dressed, and he has no idea what's going on. He kicks Colt out. Maddie is screaming, and so he's just really upset because he feels like Maddie did this because she knew he wasn't home and she was taking advantage of his trust. And so he's trying to figure out how to deal with this. Julia ends up coming over randomly and unrelatedly, and she ends up talking to Maddie about everything that was happening. And Maddie confesses that they weren't hooking up, they weren't having an intimate relation, they were just kind of like hooking up or whatever. And she wasn't going to let it go that far, and so Julia is able to relay this to Deacon, and then Deacon and Maddie are able to have their own conversation, and he's glad that he can be there for moments like that because he missed those kind of moments when she was growing up because he didn't know that she was his daughter, and so they kind of make up over that. We also see that Luke gets the wind of it and he has to fly home. He was hanging out with Jade St. John and he has to fly home to talk to the cult, and they don't really have too much of a conversation, which is interesting because obviously it probably has to do with the fact that he's a boy and stuff like that. But obviously Maddie, we saw her kind of get like the worst end of it. It could be because Colt is not like a main character at this point, and that's why we saw so much more of how it impacted Maddie, but we didn't really see Colt get reprimanded for anything. Next, I want to talk about Jeff and Layla. So obviously, as I mentioned before, they are still dating. They're hooking up. Jeff has wormed his way into being her manager and kind of helping her get opportunities for herself. And what happened is he tells her to release a song on iTunes, and this is a way of generating buzz without having to really do much to generate that buzz, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like there's a full plan for how to get her publicity. And so the fact that she's able to get publicity off of just publishing a song, that's really amazing, and they're kind of like impressed with her, even though they're mad that she didn't go about this the right way. And so this leads to her being able to become Jade St. John's pre-opener just because Jade and Jeff know each other. And so Jeff goes to Jade and proposes that Layla be the pre-opener. In exchange for this, Jeff has to introduce Jade to Luke. And so Jade starts hanging out with Luke, and they're just kind of really wild. Obviously, Jade is played by Christina Aguilera, and I kind of didn't really like this Jade character. It just seemed very random, and it didn't really add anything to the story. And so I personally wasn't really invested in this Jade and Luke connection. I was more invested in the Luke and Sadie connection because I felt like there was actually something there. And so I would have rather them explore that relationship instead of bringing in this new character who really wasn't adding anything. And then, as a result of Layla opening for Jade and doing well, Jade invites her to a party that she's hosting, and Layla wants to like make friends. She wants to kind of get to know people so that she can boost her own public profile. And so she's meeting other celebrities or whatever at the party, and she takes a picture with one of them, and she wants to post it to Twitter. Jade tells her that she can't post it, and then she's making out with some other guy. Jeff is getting upset. Luke doesn't feel like he fits in at the party, and then obviously he gets the call about Colt. And then what happens is Layla is making out with other people. She gets really drunk, and Jeff kind of has to carry her out of the party, and he gets a hold of her phone, and he ends up tweeting the picture that she was told not to post as her, and this kind of gets her dropped. This gets her dropped from Jade's tour because she did something that she was told not to do, and then this starts like a Twitter war between Layla and Jade, and obviously Jeff is orchestrating all of this behind the scenes because he's using this as a way to get publicity for Layla, and it works. The only downside is that Jeff is obviously manipulating Layla. He's lying to her. Like, he told her that people were saying that she was fat, but that was not the case. She went online and she did all of this research to see what people were saying about her, and she realized that Jeff was lying to her. And then she also realized that he had her phone at some point that night, and so she's able to figure out that he had tweeted that picture, not her. And then also, I think that for whatever reason, it seems like she is not managing her phone because her phone rings. She's in the office and she calls Jeff, presumably to answer the phone. And so she sees that she has a voicemail, but it's from Raina. And I almost wasn't sure if it was Raina talking about Juliet. I was really confused. I wasn't paying that close attention, but it sounded like either Raina was talking about Juliet or she was talking to Layla, and she was telling Layla that she wants to talk to her one-on-one, not through Jeff or something like that. And so I was really confused by that, but I was also really glad to see Layla finally confront Jeff on everything he was doing. You see him pulling up to the house. They're behind a gated community, whatever, and she just takes like a golf club to his car. She's destroying everything that she can, and she's confronting him about all of the stuff that he's been doing behind the back. He even made her sign a contract so that in the event that she wants to drop him or fire him, she can't, and he can still make money off of her and whatever. And so he has her convinced that this is because of whatever happened with Jade, and we don't really know that story, but he has done a good job of like working his way into her life. And I kind of hate this for her because she had just finished getting out of her situation with Will, and that relationship was very traumatizing for her. She went through a lot, and then we just see her dealing with the same type of situation all over again with someone who's even worse than Will, if that makes sense. And so I was just really disappointed to see that for her because she can definitely do a lot better and she doesn't need Jeff in her corner to make things happen for her. Moving on to my next point, I want to talk about the Note for Note event. And so this was an event that Teddy was throwing, and it was basically connected to having studios in schools so that kids could record and kind of get into the music scene. And obviously this was this whole thing of having studios and music equipment in schools and stuff like that was Jeff's way of using Edge Hill to kind of manipulate Jeff into slowly giving him control over Maddie. And so anyway, we have Teddy hosting this event. We have Raina, Daphne, Maddie, and I think Deacon's supposed to perform at this event, but Deacon gets the call that he had a new liver ready for him, and so they leave that event to go to the hospital. And Maddie wants to go with Raina and Deacon, so that leaves Teddy and Daphne by herself. And poor Daphne is really feeling left out because obviously Deacon is not her father, and I feel like she's included in some things with Deacon and Maddie, but Maddie really gets a lot of one-on-one time with Deacon, and so you can really see that Daphne is really starting to feel like, hey, I only have one dad, I'm not getting a lot of attention and so on. And so I definitely feel for her at this point of the season because she's really not getting that much attention. The one thing that I really did like for her is that Teddy really went above and beyond for her, and he was able to get her to still be able to perform, but to perform with Luke. And they sung the song Have a Little Faith, and I really love that song because I heard it I first heard it in Dawson's Creek. I actually didn't watch Dawson's Creek when it was aired on TV. I had maybe seen a few clips here and there, but I didn't really know like the plot and like the ins and out of the TV show, and I definitely didn't hear any of the music. And so I started watching Dawson's Creek maybe within the last 2 or 3 years, and I got through the first season. I got all the way up until like they started college or whatever, and I think in the first season they play that song, and so I really like that song, and that was one of the songs that I downloaded on iTunes, and I was really glad to hear them sing that song in the show as well. And then at this event, we also have Juliet wanting to use this event to make her to reintroduce herself into the music scene in Nashville. She's been out with having a baby, and so she really just wants to get reintegrated into things. And so she really wants to use this event to get herself a performance in front of all of these music people in Nashville. And in order to perform, she basically has to donate money, and it's a bid basically. And so she gets into a bidding war with Jade, and it's either Juliet's people bidding so that she performs, or Jade bidding so that Layla performs. And so obviously Juliet is the first person who bids. It starts at maybe like 25,000. Jade chips in, they go back and forth, and then Jade ends up putting in $500,000 in order for Layla to sing, and Juliet can't top this or whatever, and so she is forced to kind of stop bidding at maybe like 222K or something like that, which is crazy that she even has that much money to blow on one night just because she wants to sing that badly. And so I'm glad that she didn't keep pushing because she probably would have wasted 500K in one night just so that she could sing. And so I'm glad that she kind of really came to her senses with that. But we did see the nasty side of her because she really went at Jade and told her that she didn't really belong and that everybody knew it, and she was just trying to buy her way in. And obviously this is what everyone was saying about Juliet when she first came on the scene, because she was a pop artist and she was trying to break into country music, and so she was in the same boat as Jade. But I don't know that she had necessarily the right to judge Jade when she was literally in that same position. And so we do see that when Juliet and Avery get back home, he goes off on her for trying to even use that event as her comeback moment, and she just really doesn't get it. And so they just continue to have clashes throughout the rest of the season. We even covers what some of those clashes were earlier in this episode, but she's just doing a bunch of things to really get her career back on track, and she's just making all of the wrong decisions. Lastly, what I want to get into everything that's next for Deacon with his health issues. And so we know that Deacon got called to the hospital during the Note for Note event. There was a new liver. The issue was that the liver was from somebody who had tumors on their lungs or something like that, and so they weren't sure if the cancer spread to the liver, so he couldn't use that liver. And then before that, there was an issue with Deacon being sick, and they didn't know if he was too sick to where they wouldn't be able to do the procedure, so he basically was having a rough moment because they thought he was getting a new liver, and then everything that went wrong, and so he this was a crappy night for their family. And so one of the things with his health issue is that they need to monitor the size of his tumor, because if it gets past 5 centimeters, he's not eligible for a transplant, and he was already maybe at 4.5 when they discovered it, and so obviously the tumor is continuing to grow, and at the point where they thought they had a liver for him and it didn't work out, I think he was getting closer to 4.7. And then we do see this moment where Raina goes to see Beverly in Mississippi. She lies to Deacon and tells him that she's going to New York, but she's actually going to Mississippi, and she's really trying to convince Beverly to help Deacon live, to give her liver, part of her liver to him so that he can survive this ordeal. And so she makes several attempts to talk through this situation with Beverly. Beverly doesn't want to hear it. She goes to Beverly at her job, she goes to Beverly at this nightclub, and then she goes to Beverly finally at her house. And that third or fourth time that she's trying to talk to Beverly, she just gives her a check. And I initially thought the check was for $1,000. I don't know why, I don't know how I misread it, but it turned out that the check was actually for $1 million, which makes a lot more sense, because for everything that Beverly would be going through in order to give part of her liver to Deacon, she would need to get like a big chunk of money. Normally, you don't even need to give somebody money when they're doing something like that for you. You just need to be grateful, be appreciative, and then maybe cover their expenses. But the fact that Raina was willing to pay $1 million for Beverly to do this for them is saying a lot, and it's speaking to how much she wanted Deacon to survive all of this. And I'm actually very curious on whether or not you can actually pay somebody to donate body parts like that. I know there's a thing of the black market. I don't really think that that applies in this situation, but I could be mistaken. But when I saw that scene, that was what popped into my head. And so obviously we have Beverly showing up later on, and she's showing up like literally at the last minute and in just the perfect time to save Deacon's life. And we see her have a conversation with Raina, where she's basically confronting Raina, and she's saying, you know, you gave me a check for $1 million, so I'm either the B who $1 million wasn't good enough to save her brother, or I'm the B who needed to take $1 million in order to save my brother. And so she realized that she was in a no-win situation, and so by her showing up, it makes her look like the hero. And so we see that Beverly still doesn't really have good intentions of saving her brother. She's really doing it for her evil. She's really doing it for her ego. She's really doing it to show up Raina, and she just seems like she's going to be a huge disaster for them going forward in season 4. And I'm kind of excited to see how that is going to play out. So one thing I want to cover prior to Deacon having the surgery. So we do have at some point news breaks that Deacon has cancer, and so we see him driving, he's talking to Maddie, and then we see him listening to the radio, and the people are talking about how he's a great performer, how he has cancer. And so this kind of really throws him off, because he was planning to perform at the Bluebird, and then this news broke, and so he wanted to cancel the performance. He had asked the exes to sing with him, and so being that Scarlett is part of the exes, he called her and told her, hey, you know, I'm canceling, can you guys cover for me, and so on. And so I was really sad, because he was really excited for that performance. He didn't want to deal with everyone feeling sorry for him, and then he talked about how everyone was treating him like he was a ghost, or talking about him like he was a ghost, and he didn't really like that. And so we see this moment where Raina and Deacon are talking, and they're just really kind of like talking about what the future looks like for them and stuff like that. And then they decide to go to the Bluebird and they perform. And so that was a really great moment because there are amazing performances at the Bluebird. Deacon was a regular performing there, and so I'm really glad that he was able to show up and allow those people to love on him and support him and all of that good stuff. And so I'm really glad that he had that moment. So next, what we have happening to kind of end the series is that we have that scene between Scarlett and Gunnar that I mentioned where they're singing their new song and then they kiss. But then we also have Deacon going into his surgery. Beverly goes first to obviously take out the liver, and then we have Deacon going in to be opened up so that they can put the liver in him. And at the beginning of maybe one of the last episodes or two, we see Deacon kind of having like these nightmares or these thoughts about something going wrong with the surgery. And we have him on the table, and the doctors are saying, let's play music. They put the mask on him so that he goes to sleep, and then you kind of see that playing out in real life. And I feel like he knows that something is wrong when all that is happening because it happened in a dream and it didn't turn out well because he flatlined or whatever. And so he is in real life and he's going through that exact scenario and he's freaking out and he's like, wait. But obviously they don't hear him because he has the mask on. And so that is where season 3 ends, and we have no idea what's happening because we see Caleb go into the waiting room, tells Raina that he needs to speak with her, that he has bad news, and we have no idea what that bad news is. And so that is where season 3 ends. So to go ahead and wrap up this episode, I'm really super excited for season 4. I actually have not started watching it yet because I wanted to record this episode while season 3 was still fresh in my mind. I'm really interested in seeing what happens with Will and Kevin going into season 4. I really want to know what happens with Layla. I hope she dumps Jeff and kind of just gets on a better path to everything that she wants as far as music. And I really hope that Juliet figures out whatever is going on with her. I hope that she is able to get her family back together as far as Avery and Cadence because she has been making a lot of horrible decisions in season 3. I mean, she's been doing that in season 1 and 2, but I think that there's a bigger cost in season 3 of her making those types of decisions because it really impacts her family. And then I'm also interested to see what happens with Scarlett and Gunnar. I do actually hope that they get back together because I just really like her better with Gunnar because they are kind of like in the same industry, they know each other so well, and they just kind of fit better. I do like the fact that she's with Caleb and he's someone who's stable, successful, and kind of like an adult or whatever, but I really think that Gunnar is her perfect match, especially with how in love with her we saw that he was in season 1. And so I really hope that they can get it together, still be in their band, and also have a romantic relationship. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I can't wait to have the next episode on season 4.